The sky above the fields was still black. A lantern moved slowly across the barnyard, its light catching the dew on the fence rails, the breath of a horse rising in the cold air, the shape of a man pulling his coat tighter as he crossed from the house to the barn. The land was quiet in the way that places are quiet when work is about to begin. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the first pale line of morning was already forming. The farm did not wait for it. Before the sun rose over the fields, the work had already begun. These are 20 things that were once part of everyday life on American farms. If you enjoy exploring the forgotten rhythms of everyday American life, consider subscribing. Now, let's count down. Number 20. Waking before sunrise. The wood stove was the first thing. Ash raked back, coals coaxed with a breath, kindling laid carefully until the flame took hold and the iron began to tick with heat. In winter, the bedroom was cold enough to see your breath. In summer, the darkness outside was softer, full of crickets and the distant sound of cattle moving through the pasture. Boots were pulled on by feel. A coat lifted from the peg. The screen door swung open and slapped shut behind the farmer as he stepped into the yard, and the farm received him the way it always did, without ceremony, already in motion. Number 19. Feeding the livestock. Hogs met the farmer at the gate, pressing their broad heads against the boards and grunting steadily. Grain was scooped into the trough and they pushed together over it, ears back, focused entirely on the work of eating. In the barn, cattle shifted in their stanchions at the sound of hay being thrown down from the loft. It landed in loose golden piles on the floor below. Chickens moved in quick jerks across the yard, heads dipping at scattered grain. Each animal had its hour and its portion. When the feeding was done, the barnyard settled into a sound that was not silence: breathing, chewing, the occasional low call of a cow finding her calf. Number 18. Collecting eggs. The henhouse in early morning smelled of warm straw and sleep. The hens had been at work through the night, and the nesting boxes held their results. A hand moved carefully into each one, feeling for the smooth weight of an egg. Some hens stayed put, watching with one flat eye. Others stepped aside without complaint. The eggs were laid into a cloth-lined basket, warm against the fingers. At the house, they were sorted. A cracked one was set aside. A clean, unblemished egg was worth something at the general store in town, traded toward coffee or flour, or a length of cotton cloth. The small commerce of rural life moving quietly along. Number 17. Milking cows. The cow stood in her stanchion and chewed. The farmer sat beside her on a low stool, the pail wedged between his knees, and the work began. The first streams of milk struck the tin with a high, sharp ring. As the pail filled, the sound dropped to a steady, muffled rhythm. The barn around them was still half dark, and the smell of hay and animal warmth was thick in the air. A good milking took 20 minutes or more, twice a day without exception. When it was done, the milk was carried to the house, strained through clean cloth, and set to cool in the cellar or the spring house, where the cold held it. Number 16. Chopping firewood. The maul came down clean and the log split along its grain, the two halves falling away from each other onto the frozen ground. The woodpile was a record of preparation. A tall, tight stack meant the family was ready for February. A low one meant more mornings like this one, with the axe rising and falling in the cold and the light just beginning to come over the tree line. Good firewood was cut in summer and left to season, the sap drying out of it over months until it burned hot and clean. Children carried split pieces to the porch in armloads, stacking them beside the door where they would be easy to reach when the stove needed feeding. Number 15. Carrying water. The pump handle moved up and down and the water came. Cold, clear, pulling up from deep in the ground. It filled the bucket in heavy surges, and carrying it was work the arms felt by mid-morning. Animals drank enormous amounts. A team of horses in field work needed watering several times a day. The house needed water for cooking, washing, and drinking. In dry summers, the water table dropped and the pump pulled more slowly. the effort greater for less result. In deep winter, the pipe froze solid and the farmer chipped at ice over the creek with a flat bar, scooping water up by the bucket and carrying it back across the frozen yard. Number 14. Repairing fences. A length of barbed wire lying flat in the grass was easy to miss until a cow had already found it. Fence lines were walked regularly, the farmer moving along the posts with an eye for the leaning, the rusted, the snapped. Cedar posts lasted longest in the ground. Oak split best. Where a post had heaved over the winter or rotted through at the soil line, a new one was driven in with a post maul, the sound carrying sharp and wooden across the quiet fields. Wire was stretched and stapled back. The work was unglamorous and constant. A fence that kept animals where they belonged was worth more than almost any other feature on the farm. Number 13. Harnessing horses. The collar went on first, shaped to the curve of the horse's neck, heavy leather worn smooth by years of use. Then the hames, clipped into the groove of the collar, and the traces running back to whatever implement waited in the field. The horse stood quiet for most of it, shifting weight from foot to foot, exhaling slowly. Getting it wrong meant sores by noon. A collar that sat even slightly crooked would rub and open the skin within hours, and a horse with a collar sore was a horse that could not work. Experienced farmers moved through the harnessing without pausing, adjusting by touch, checking each buckle before leading the team out of the barn into the morning light. Number 12. Checking the crops. The corn rows were long, and a farmer moved through them slowly, reading each plant. A leaf curling under at its tip, a stalk leaning at an angle it should not, pale color where dark green should be. The signs were small, and they mattered. Insects announced themselves through chewed edges and tiny holes. Drought showed up in the way a leaf lost its flatness and began to fold lengthwise. Standing water in the low corner of a field was trouble that would only deepen. None of this required special equipment, only time spent looking, the accumulated knowledge of seasons past, and the willingness to stop and examine what was actually there rather than what was hoped for. Number 11. Sharpening tools. The whetstone was worn into a shallow curve from years of use. Oil was dripped along its surface, and the blade of the hoe was drawn across it in long, even strokes, the angle held steady. When the edge caught the light cleanly and pulled a thin curl of fingernail without pressing, it was ready. Dull tools were attacks on every hour of work. More effort for less result, the body working against resistance that proper sharpening would have removed. Scythes were peened on a small anvil before sharpening, the steel hammered thin so the whetstone had something to work with. The process was quiet and meditative, the sound of steel on stone, the smell of machine oil, the slow return of an edge. Number 10. Maintaining equipment. The plow came in from the field with soil packed into every joint. The wagon had a cracked spoke that had been noticed 3 days ago and ignored one day too many. The leather traces were stiff where sweat had dried into them. None of it would fix itself. Lard worked into the wagon axle. Neat's foot oil rubbed into the harness until the leather moved again. The cracked spoke, replaced with a new one, turned on the farm's own lathe from a piece of straight-grained ash. Farmers who kept equipment running through regular attention rarely lost whole days to sudden failures. The ones who didn't spend planting week searching for a blacksmith who could come before the window closed. Number 9. Working the fields by hand. The cultivator turned the soil between the rows, but the hoe did what the cultivator could not. A person moved down the row bent at the waist, the blade cutting just below the surface, severing weeds at the root and loosening the soil crust so water could get in. The work was slow. A quarter-mile row of corn took the better part of an hour to hoe properly. The sun on a July field was direct and unforgiving. Sweat soaked through the back of a cotton shirt by mid-morning and did not dry until evening. Water was carried in a clay jug tied with cloth and left in what shade there was. The row ended, turned, and started again. Number 8. Preserving food. The kitchen in August was a place of sustained effort. The stove burned all day while jars went into the canning kettle and came out sealed. The lids dimpled tight with the pop of cooling. Green beans, corn cut off the cob, tomatoes peeled in hot water and packed in their own juice. The smell of cooking fruit filled the house and drifted into the yard. In the smokehouse behind the barn, sides of pork hung from the rafters in the cured dark. The hickory smoke long since done its work. Root vegetables descended into the cellar in baskets, laid out in sand or sawdust. By September, the shelves were full, and the full shelves were the point. Number 7. Tending the garden. The garden was close to the house, close enough to check between other tasks, close enough to hear if something was wrong. A row of tomatoes needed tying up after a night of wind. Squash vines had escaped their bed and were headed toward the onions. A section of low wire fencing had a gap where something small had pushed through. The beans wanted picking. The soil between the rows was crusted from yesterday's rain drying in the sun and needed loosening with the hoe. A kitchen garden on a working farm was not decorative. It was the most immediate source of food the household had, and it required attention the way anything living requires attention. Daily, consistent, responsive to what it showed. Number 6. Mending clothes. The lamp on the kitchen table gave just enough light to thread a needle. The mending basket held what the day had produced. A torn knee on a pair of overalls, a shirt missing 2 buttons, a sock worn through at the heel. Patches were cut from flour sacks or from worn-out garments set aside for the purpose. The needle worked in and out through doubled fabric, the stitches small and close where the stress was greatest. A wooden darning egg slipped inside the sock held the shape, while the heel was rewoven. Buttons were sorted into a jar, mismatched, collected over years, each one saved because replacing it someday was easier than finding a new one at the dry goods store. Number 5. Preparing animal feed. Corn was cracked for the chickens, whole ears broken apart and run through a hand-cranked grinder bolted to the feed room wall. Slop for the hogs went into a wooden barrel. Kitchen scraps, sour milk, cracked grain, water, mixed into a gray paste that smelled of fermentation. A milking cow in full production got a coffee can of oats at each milking, measured into the trough, while she stood and ate. Horses in heavy work got more grain than horses resting in the pasture. The ration adjusted without much deliberation, by feel and long habit. The feed room was dim and smelled of grain dust and dry corn silt. The animals outside knew the sounds it made. Number 4. Storing the harvest. Corn came off the field in the fall, still in the husk, thrown into the wagon by the armload. At the crib, it was pitched through the slatted walls in long arcs and left to finish drying in the moving air. A full crib at the end of harvest was a good sound, the ears tumbling against each other, shifting and settling as the pile grew. Wheat went into the granary in sacks or shoveled loose into wooden bins lined against rodents with sheet tin. Potatoes went down the cellar stairs in bushel baskets. Tobacco hung on sticks in the curing barn with the ventilation slats adjusted each morning by the temperature and feel of the air inside. Number 3. Watching the weather. A ring around the moon. Cattle moving without being driven. Swallows cutting low across the field in the late afternoon. These were the instruments available to a farmer without a radio or a telephone, and they were read with the seriousness that circumstances demanded. Getting hay into the barn before a rainstorm was not a matter of preference. Wet hay that heated in the loft could smolder and burn the barn down. A hard freeze on a clear April night could take out an entire orchard. The farmer watched the western sky at sundown, read the direction of the wind by the feel of it on the back of the neck, and made decisions that could not be postponed until better information arrived. Number 2. Evening chores. The light went amber and then gray, and the shadows of the fence posts stretched long across the yard. The cows came up from the pasture on their own, moving through the gate and into the barn in the order they always used. The chickens were counted into the henhouse and the latch dropped. Hogs were fed a second time. Horses were unhitched and watered and given their evening grain. The stall doors swung shut and bolted. A lantern made the rounds, checking that everything was quiet, that no ember had fallen in dry hay, that the barn cat had found her place in the loft. The yard went still. The farmhouse windows began to glow. Number 1. Planning the next day. After supper, the house was quiet. The stove had settled into a low burn and the lamp threw a circle of yellow light across the table. The farmer sat for a while, turning the day over. What had not gotten done? Whether the weather would hold for cutting oats tomorrow? Which field needed attention first? Whether the trip to town could wait another week, or whether the supply of lamp oil had dropped far enough that it could not. No list was written down on most farms. The accounting happened somewhere behind the eyes, patient and methodical, while the rest of the house went about its evening. By the time the lamp was turned down, the next morning had already taken shape. The daily life of an American farm in the decades between 1880 and 1950 was held together by repetition. The same tasks returned each morning, each evening, each season, each year. Animals fed and watered, fences walked and mended, tools sharpened, equipment kept running, food put up against the coming winter. The work was physical and immediate, connected directly to outcomes that could be seen and felt. A full cellar, a sound roof, animals in good condition, a field that produced. Across the American countryside, on thousands of farms spread from the coastal plains to the high prairies, these same rhythms played out daily, in the particular silence of places where the work never fully stops and the next morning always comes early.